Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Triple N Media. Today, we are going to learn how we can simulate a concert setup in our living room or bedroom. Here's a setup I have which can simulate concert photography. First of all, we need to have a laptop such as MacBook Pro with Retina display so you can have high resolution video that you can play on your laptop. We'll come to the details in a minute. The second step is to set up our camera here on a tripod stand. Put a chair next to that so that we can take pictures and write down the various settings for each picture. Now you go to YouTube and pick the most interesting concert that you are interested in and bring it up to a full screen. Either you can use a still picture or use a actual running video to practice your photography from your camera. Here's my setup from a different angle. I am using Nikon D5200, which has a zoom lens from 18 to 140 millimeters. My initial setup is a shutter priority with the shutter speed at 1/160th, f5.6, and an ISO of 1600. The exposure compensation is 1.7, and I have a single point focus. But right now we are not ready to test the settings because we still have daylight here. So what I would suggest is wait till it gets dark, and then I'll show you how to focus the camera to just take a zoomed image of the computer screen or the laptop screen. Here's a look at my camera, which is set at 140, the maximum zoom I have, which is a Nikon DX VR macro 18 to 40 millimeters, 3.5 to 5.6. I also have a 50 to 300 millimeter lens, which would be most suitable for stage or concert photography. If you are taking pictures of your daughter dancing on the stage, 50 to 300 millimeter lens will come in real handy. Now, once we have set up the scenario, we want to select the picture that we want to test with various settings. And here I have my laptop, which is MacBook. I have brought up a shallow concert, and we got some real good different variable lightings and sharp instrument borders and clear faces that we can see. So I'm going to use this one picture as an example to test various settings to see what is the optimal setting for this one. And if we can simulate what exactly we see on the screen in our pictures, then we would be pretty close to taking pictures that simulate the artist on the stage in a real setup. Again, my camera is set up here, which is Nikon, as I said. It is zoomed all the way to 140 millimeters, and I have a little light here, so when it gets dark, at least we can see certain things, but when you're ready to take pictures, we can turn this light off. And here I have turned the dial so that I can see all the various settings. I can make a note of what I'm doing so that I have a record of what is being recorded. Talking about record, here what I would do is have a notepad and write down the image number and the various settings you had so that when you go back to check it, it would be much easier to see which settings give you the most optimal that is acceptable to you. The next step is go to YouTube and do a lot of research and find out how different people have done so that you get ideas and you write down all your ideas so that you can incorporate all those ideas into your own system of getting the optimal settings for concert photography. Now, you see, it's almost dark now. All I'm seeing is a computer lit screen from the MacBook Pro. You can hardly see my camera here. I have a little night light in the background, and we're going to turn that one off also once we start taking pictures. Here is my setup. I got a little chair, and I'll be looking through the lens and focusing the camera so that it just right now it is showing the entire desk with the laptop and various things in the background, and all the lights are turned off. And the next thing is now we are ready to test some different settings. Now here's the first picture, which is, first of all, the camera is zoomed all the way so that all I'm going to see will be the computer monitor, the laptop monitor, and little keyboard here. So, and we are going to focus on the sharpness of the edges. We're going to focus on the lighting, and we are also going to look at the overall image. This is the first setting, which is shutter priority 1/160th, f5.6, ISO 1600, and the lens is zoomed to 140 millimeters with an exposure compensation of 1.3. Yeah, we cannot make much with just one picture, but nonetheless, this picture is fairly sharp considering the fact that we are imaging a computer screen, a laptop monitor screen, which is not even high resolution. The MacBook which I have is from 2011, which doesn't have even a retina display. But if you have a retina display and you look at this picture on the laptop monitor, and if you can duplicate that on your camera, that is getting close to what it would look if you were to take a picture of a real artist on a real stage given the same settings. All right, now let's move on to some variations in the settings here. That's the first one. Next, remember it is 1/60th of a second here. This is 1/60th of a second. Now let's move on to the next picture. And now this is 1/30th of a second. That means we increase the amount of exposure by almost one stop. And you can see his skin is lighter compared to the previous one, and even the edges are a little bit sharper, and we can see this man's face light up a little bit compared to the previous one. And the only change we did was to reduce the shutter speed to 1/30th of a second. Okay, let's move on and see what else we can do. And now here's a picture which has 1/15th of a second. That is almost 2 f-stops from the first one. And you can see his face really now lighted up very beautifully. And even the shallow looks very sharp and clear. And you see this man's face looks considerably lighter compared to the first image we saw. Now we're going to go back and to try something different here. And that is, I went back to 1/60th of a shutter speed, f5.6, ISO 1600. So zoom, everything else was the same, but I increased the exposure compensation to 3.0. So you may have to go back to look at the previous slides and see, but nonetheless, because we increased the shutter speed, the skin got a little bit darker, and this man's face is a little bit darker, but still the shallow is pretty sharp edge, and you can see even his fingers, which are fairly sharp considering the fact that we are photographing a laptop monitor image. And of course, these are all still pictures, but as you get more comfortable and more familiar, you can start recording pictures in a moving video, and you can do changes on the fly and see how things differ. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to go back to the original picture that we had, and that is 1/60th of a second shutter speed. And now the ISO is 3200 instead of 1600 we started off. I had to bump the ISO in my Nikon 5200, for which I had to go to the menu and change the upper limit of the ISO to 3200. We can increase the ISO as long as the images come out real sharp. But the problem with increasing the ISO is that it will invariably add noise. It becomes sort of granular. It's like a cloudy image. And if you look at it, the image in the background looks a little bit dusky. And that's something you want to avoid. In order to do that, you want to use the least amount of ISO, so there is least amount of noise introduced into your image. Okay, having taken that into consideration, let's move on to the next picture here, where remember our ISO is, shutter speed is 1/60th. Now we're going to go further, increase the shutter speed further to 1/25th of a second. When you increase the shutter speed and keep the rest of the things same, again the image is going to be lighter because there's less amount of, almost half the amount of light getting to the sensor. As a result, the image becomes darker. So as the lighting goes down, actually your shutter speed also need to go down to allow more time for the light to reach the camera. Now you can see a clear distinction here, and by increasing the shutter speed, this is a compromise because in a fast moving concert, you want to get a faster shutter speed. If you do that, you have to the camera automatically increases the ISO. Since the f-stop is going to be fairly fixed, my lens is from 3.5 to 5.6, but it would not go to 3.6. So it would stop at 5.6 no matter what I do. I had to find out from some experts how to manually set it to 3.6 if I can, especially when I am zooming the lens to 140 millimeters. This is what exactly happens in a concert situation where you're maybe a few rows behind, and the artist may be so far that you're going to need 200 or 300 millimeter focal length to focus on the artist's face or on one particular single artist or an instrument. That's one thing that we need to keep into consideration. And that's the zoom. The next part is the speed. If the artist is moving very fast and very abruptly, then you need a faster shutter speed to capture that artist. When you do that, the ISO goes up. So taking photography in low lighting, it's all about compromise. What is the best you can do and what is the best you can get given the circumstances? So that's how we need to compare these various settings, and by playing with it hundreds of times each night, if you want to be a concert photographer, this is the best way. Pull up a video of a rock concert or whatever concert that you are interested in taking photographs, and then use that as a simulation model and set up the camera like I have set up, and just start clicking hundreds and hundreds of pictures, because you can always go back and look at the settings of these pictures by looking into the information in Photoshop. In that way, you see which picture looks best and what was the setting. Then you memorize that one so that you can use the same setting in a real situation, so that you will be able to take photography as good as you would like to. And here's a final picture here, which is at a speed of shutter speed of 1/200th of a second, and obviously the ISO is 3200 and the f point is 5.6. One way to adjust this would be to bring the f point 2 steps down. That is, if you have a zoom lens which is with the lowest being 2.8, then you can change the ISO to 1/200. Those zoom lenses which are 2.8 to start with are going to be pretty expensive. But again, as I said, low light concert photography, it's all about compromise. What is the best you can do with the equipment that you have and get the best looking pictures? There's one more thing I would like to suggest, and that is to use bracketing. Just go to Google and go to YouTube and do some search on your particular camera how to do the bracketing. Bracketing is where the camera automatically takes 3 or 5 rapid sequence pictures with varying setups. One f-stop lower and one f-stop higher than what is camera reading, and so that you have at least 3 pictures to select from every time you shoot. So these are some of the tips that you can use to practice your low light concert photography in your living room without ever having to attend a concert, so that when you do attend a concert, your fingertips, your eyes, your brain, everything will be able to function so synchronously that you can be just, all you're doing would be clicking tick 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 photographies, and you won't even have time to look at those because the concerts are so much packed with images, noise, sound, lighting, stimulation, and all these things. You get the picture. So this is a simple way, and you can do the same thing for portrait photography also. You can put a big portrait photography in the on a wall like this. Start practicing different settings and see which one works. If your prime lens works, what is the distance that you need to keep the object from the camera, and what are the settings that give you the exact replica of the portrait that you have on the wall. In that way, you will be able to practice any type of photography in your living room by using this simple technique. I hope this has been useful to you. I am Dr. NIK NIKAM. You have been watching Triple N Media. And if you like this video, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.